Oh, you're dying to know what actually happened. So here we go. Just yesterday, Israel officially renamed Route 60 to the Biblical Highway. And before you click off because you're wondering how in the world this is significant or why in the world you should care, let me explain, because this is one of the most groundbreaking things to happen in Israel in decades. Many nations of the world have historic routes that trace history and tradition. In America, we have Route 66. And now Israel has Route 60, the Biblical Highway. Route 60 is a historic trade route dating all the way back to the times of Abraham. That's 4,000 years. And it stretches from Nazareth in the north, where Jesus lived as a boy, to Beersheba in the south, where it said that Abraham taught travelers about the God of Israel. What's so controversial about this significant road is that it also goes directly through Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, even passing by our studios just at the bottom of the Mount of Blessing, which is like a mile from where I'm recording this video right now. What's so significant about this road is that it also stretches along some of the most historical and biblically significant sites in Israel, and maybe the entire Middle East. We're talking like places like Nazareth, which I just mentioned, Mount Tabor, which I'm sure you've heard of, where the Transfiguration may have happened in the New Testament, the Valley of Megiddo, where they say the famous Battle of Armageddon will happen one day, Shechem, where Joshua came to the land of Israel. Jacob actually bought the field. Joshua came in with the tribes, and the bones of Joseph were buried in Shechem. Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal. I just happen to be sitting on Mount Gerizim right now, where Jesus ministered to the woman at the well. And these two mountains are also where the 12 tribes stood and listened to the blessings and the curses, and they answered amen when Joshua read them to them. Joshua's altar is still sitting on Mount Ebal right now. Elon Moreh is just a couple miles down the road, where God spoke to Abraham in Genesis 12 and promised him the whole land. Shiloh is where the tabernacle stood for almost 400 years. Beit El, or Bethel, is where Jacob had his famous dream with the angels ascending and descending on the ladder, and God reaffirmed his covenant to Jacob and the land of Israel. Anathoth, that's where Jeremiah bought a land and hid the deed in a clay pot right before Israel was exiled to Babylon. Jerusalem with the Temple Mount and the Western Wall and so many significant sites. Bethlehem, where Rachel is buried and where Jesus was born. And Hebron, where the cave of the patriarchs and matriarchs is. And Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah are buried. Beersheba, where Jacob dug wells and where Abraham lived and taught people about God. Those are just the major places. You can hardly drive 10 feet along this road without touching some significant place from history or the Bible. Abraham traveled this road. Jesus traveled this road. Patriarchs, prophets, pioneers, all from scriptures. Battles were fought along this road. Think about the Maccabees. Some of the battles of the Maccabees were fought right next to this highway. Covenants were ratified and reaffirmed right along this historic route. Some people believe that the majority of the Bible was written or occurred in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. And Route 60, the new biblical highway, is the central route in these stories. At the same time, the Biblical Highway and Judea and Samaria have been front and center in a global controversy centered around the idea that if Israel just simply gives the Arabs their land and creates a Palestinian state, there will magically be peace in the Middle East. Kind of ironic that the most significant places in Israel are also smack dab in the center of the globe's biggest conflicts, isn't it? But I'm sure that's just coincidence that the very places where God made and reaffirmed his covenants with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are also the very places the world is trying to take from Israel to give to their enemies. For years, the world has believed that if they simply pressure Israel into giving away their very heartland to create a Palestinian state, there would be peace in the Middle East. And as we know, and you probably know if you're watching this as well, that's not going to happen, ever, because Israel's enemies are open about their bloodthirstiness for the entire land of Israel, from the river to the sea, Jude and Rhine, Jew-free. So this week's renaming ceremony of Route 60 to the Biblical Highway is Israel's way of telling the world there will never be a Palestinian state in our biblical heartland. While the world was busy imposing a disastrous Iranian deal on Israel in the Middle East, the only Jewish nation in the world decided to stand up proudly and declare that their land belongs to them and they will never give it away. At the dedication ceremony yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu said this: "Today we decided that Highway 60 will be called the name it deserves. Through the Bible, the way our forefathers walked, where the story of our people was written, and where we say loudly, Israel has returned home, and we will stay here forever because this is our land."
Ladies and gentlemen, you've all been deceived. Stop using toxic...
At a new neighborhood in Gush Etzion, in Judea, to plant a tree and celebrate the inauguration of a new neighborhood in the Jewish community of Migdal Oz. Just another way for him to affirm his commitment to hold on to and make the Jewish people sovereign in Judea and Samaria. So the plans for this initiative about Highway 60 and the Biblical Highway are to create a Route 66 style experience for people like tourists, people like Bible enthusiasts, history and archaeological lovers, and just lovers of adventure in the Bible. And as you know, here at the Israel Guys, we've been promoting the idea that Route 60 is really the biblical highway for years. After all, we've been bringing people here for over 20 years specifically to travel on this highway and visit the sites of Judea and Samaria. We've even sold hats and merchandise on our store to educate the world about how significant this place is. There's another man, however, who really deserves most of the credit for getting this road officially renamed, and that is Yishai Fleischer, the international spokesman for Hebron, a passionate and dedicated defender and influencer for Israel. He's really the man who's behind this project. Speaking to Fox News this week, Yishai said, quote, "Finally, the government is recognizing it. We've been advocating for this idea, which is similar to other roads around the world. I think it has educational, heritage, and tourism value. The government views the Bible as an important part of Israel's identity. We've been teaching it, we've been promoting it, and they've embraced the idea. Ahead of the elections, I think they want to show people that they're committed to branding Israel as the land of the Bible. And when we rename Route 60 or add the name Biblical Highway, we are strengthening that pillar of our ancient identity in this land. Certainly, people who do not want to see Israel exist seek to remove that pillar." So guys, while Iran continues to gloat that they maybe won this round with Israel and America, and the Israel haters continue bashing the Jewish nation over U.S. aid or the pro-Israel lobby, Israel did something this week to cement their identity in the Holy Land forever. They stood on their own 2 feet, and they declared with one unified voice that Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria are the biblical heartland of Israel, and it will never be given away to their enemies, no matter what anyone says or what any international pressure is imposed on them. Now that Route 60 has been renamed to the Biblical Highway, it is your turn, guys. When are you coming to visit Israel? But more